Imagine the last conversation you had. Maybe it was this morning, maybe it was 5 minutes ago. A quick exchange, nothing special. Now imagine that never existed. Not just that conversation, the entire concept of it. No words, no sentences, no names for things, no way to describe what you're feeling, no ability to warn someone, explain something, ask for help, or tell a story. Just silence, and whatever you could act out with your hands and your face. Take language away from human history, and you don't just make the world quieter. You make the world almost entirely unrecognizable. Let's start with something that sounds simple, but isn't. Language is not just communication. Every other animal on Earth communicates. Bees do it. Dolphins do it. Wolves do it. What they can't do is talk about something that isn't there right now. A wolf can signal danger with a howl, but it cannot tell the rest of the pack about a dangerous cliff it encountered 3 days ago on the other side of the valley and explain how to avoid it. A bee can communicate the direction and distance of flowers, but it cannot discuss what happened the last time a bear raided the hive or speculate about what might happen if the season turns cold early. Linguist and cognitive scientist Derek Bickerton spent decades studying the origins of language and identified what he called displacement, the ability to communicate about things that are absent in time or space. You can talk about yesterday. You can talk about next year. You can talk about a place you've never been. You can describe something that doesn't exist yet. This single property, displacement, separates human language from every other communication system on Earth. And it is the foundation on which almost everything distinctly human was built. Take displacement away, and your ancestors can only respond to what's directly in front of them. They cannot plan. Not really. They can act on instinct, habit, and imitation, but the kind of deliberate, multi-step, future-oriented planning that requires being able to say, if we do this now, then this will happen later. That requires language. No language means no real planning. And no real planning means survival is a very different, much more fragile thing. But it goes deeper than planning. Think about knowledge. Every piece of information your ancestors learned through experience died with them, unless they could pass it on. Not through genes, through communication. Which plants are poisonous? Which roots flood in the rainy season? Where the best hunting grounds are in late summer? How to make the particular kind of tool that took 3 years of trial and error to figure out. Without language, all of that knowledge resets with every generation. Every group of humans starts from scratch, over and over, forever. Anthropologist Joseph Henrich has written extensively on what he calls cumulative culture, the way human knowledge builds on itself across generations, each one inheriting what the last one learned and adding to it. This ratchet effect, as he calls it, is why humans don't just live like their great-great-grandparents lived. It's why we can build on the past instead of endlessly repeating it. Without language, the ratchet doesn't work. Knowledge can't accumulate because it can't be reliably transferred. Each generation inherits almost nothing from the last in terms of learned information. The slow generational climb toward anything complex, toward agriculture, toward medicine, toward any kind of technology, cannot happen. There is no ladder, because there is no way to hand the rungs down. Now here's where things get stranger still. Language didn't just allow humans to share information about the external world. It allowed humans to share information about each other. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar proposed what became known as the social brain hypothesis. The idea that the driving pressure behind the growth of the human brain was not tool use or hunting strategy, but the complexity of managing large social groups. Keeping track of who is reliable, who is deceptive, who owes what to whom, what alliances have been formed, who has broken which agreements, all of this requires cognitive overhead that scales with group size. Dunbar's research suggests that language, specifically what he calls social grooming through gossip, was the mechanism that allowed humans to maintain social bonds across much larger groups than any primate that relies on physical grooming alone. You can only groom one individual at a time, but you can talk to 3 people simultaneously, and in doing so, keep up with the social information of potentially hundreds of individuals through an interlocking web of conversation. Without language, human social groups stay small, Not because people don't want to cooperate, but because there is no mechanism to build and maintain the trust, the reputation, the shared understanding of social rules that cooperation at scale requires. Small groups mean less collective knowledge. Less collective knowledge means slower innovation. Slower innovation means a species that never quite escapes the basic demands of daily survival. And here is the piece almost no one thinks about. Language didn't just change what humans could do, it changed what humans could be. Cognitive scientist and philosopher Daniel Kahneman, along with decades of related research, has shown that human conscious thought is deeply entangled with language. When you reason about a problem, you often use inner speech, a running internal monologue. Language isn't just how you express your thoughts to others. For many kinds of thinking, it is the medium the thought happens in. Take language away, and you don't just silence the mouth. You fundamentally alter the shape of the mind itself. The experience of time becomes different. Without words for past and future, the sense of a continuous self that extends backward into memory and forward into anticipation becomes much harder to construct. You become more anchored to the present moment, not in a meditative way, but in the way an animal is anchored to the present, responsive, reactive, without the sense of a personal history or a personal future that you are steering toward. The sense of self becomes different. Identity, the story you tell about who you are, is a narrative. It is built out of language. Without language, there is experience, but there is no autobiography. No coherent sense of, I was this person, I have been through these things, I am becoming this. Even emotion becomes different. Not gone. Clearly, non-human animals experience something we'd recognize as emotion. But the layers of emotional experience that come from being able to name what you feel, to place it in a context, to connect it to a cause, to share it with another person and have them understand it, all of that is tied to language in ways that researchers are still untangling. Without language, you are still human in your biology. But the interior life you take for granted, the running commentary, the ability to plan your afternoon, to replay a conversation from this morning, to imagine a version of your life that doesn't exist yet, all of that goes quiet. So what would the world actually look like if humans never developed language? Groups would be small, maybe 20 to 50 individuals, close enough to communicate through gesture and expression and sound, but not large enough to require the complex social machinery that language makes possible. Knowledge would be localized and fragile, dying with whoever holds it. Tool technology would advance slowly, if at all, constrained to what can be learned by watching rather than by being told. There would be no agriculture, because agriculture requires coordinated planning across seasons. No written history, obviously, but also no oral history, no mythology, no religion, no law, no trade between distant groups, because trade requires trust, and trust at a distance requires the ability to make and understand promises. The species would survive. Humans are physically capable, socially inclined, and clever enough without language to navigate a world. But they would not build. They would not accumulate. They would exist in the present, in small, scattered groups, across a quiet, unchanged world, for as long as the conditions that allow their survival hold. And here is the thought that lands hardest. Every human who has ever lived, from the first recognizable member of our species to every person alive today, has been a talking animal. Language is not a tool we picked up along the way, like fire or agriculture. According to the latest research, something like language, however primitive its earliest form, has been with our species from the very beginning. It is not something we added to being human. It may be inseparable from what being human actually means. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote that the limits of your language are the limits of your world. He meant it as philosophy, but it may also be biology. It may be archaeology. It may be the most literal thing anyone has ever said. The next time you say something out loud, even something completely ordinary, I'll be there in 10 minutes, or did you see that? Notice what you just did. You moved an idea from inside your head into someone else's head. You reached across the gap between two separate human minds and made them briefly share something. That has been happening for at least 100,000 years. And every single thing that makes human civilization recognizable as civilization is downstream of that one strange biological world-altering trick.